The scream split the apartment like glass, and Emily Carter clutched Noah as the door shook in its frame. Jason Reed said, "You did this," and his breath tasted of spite and rain. The hallway lights flickered, and sirens threaded through the night like a warning. Emily whispered into Noah's hair, promising safety she wasn't sure she could give. Jason paced, shoulders tight, hands opening and closing like traps. Emily said, "Leave before he wakes," though Noah was already awake and trembling. The living room looked smaller under the storm's hiss against the windows. Jason said, "I'll take him," and the floor seemed to slide under her feet. Emily felt the old ache rise, the one stitched from years of silence. She said, "Not tonight," and tasted iron in her mouth. A neighbor knocked once, then retreated into whispers. The sirens grew louder, then faded like breath on glass. Jason's eyes flashed with a final threat, then he yanked the door wide. The slam cracked the moment in two, and quiet bled into the room. Emily held Noah tighter, and the house remembered how to breathe. Dawn pressed pale light through thin curtains, and the apartment smelled of cold coffee and rain. Emily cleaned the spilled toys as if order could hush the night's echo. Noah asked if the door would stay closed, and she said, "Yes, it knows our names." The kettle ticked toward a boil like a timid heartbeat. Emily said, "Today we breathe," though her chest felt tight. She tucked a note into Noah's backpack, a small promise folded twice. The neighbors moved softly, their steps careful on the hall. Emily said, "We'll walk to school together," and Noah nodded, brave by inches. The mirror caught her, and she almost didn't look. Mia called, and the phone vibrated with warmth and worry. Emily said, "We're okay," and the words sounded new. She opened the window a crack, letting the city's damp light in. Noah laughed at a cartoon, and the sound stitched the room. The day opened like a door that waited to be chosen. The hallway smelled of wet concrete, and their footsteps tapped in a shy rhythm. Emily held Noah's hand, and he squeezed twice like a secret code. A patrol car idled at the curb, quiet but visible. Emily said, "We keep moving," and the sidewalk answered with puddles. A neighbor offered a tight nod that said everything and nothing. The city wore last night's storm like a wrinkled coat. Noah asked if storms always leave, and Emily said they do, but they leave lessons. She lifted her chin as if the sky might notice. The crosswalk signal blinked a slow invitation. Emily said after school, "We make pancakes," and Noah grinned at the bribe. A passing bus sighed, and the world seemed to exhale with it. The day felt fragile and possible in the same breath. The office buzzed with fluorescent fatigue, and Emily's screen glowed with overdue tasks. Mia met her by the elevator with coffee, and a stare that could stitch wounds. Mia said, "Tell me everything," and the lobby swallowed their voices. Emily skimmed the edges, saving the sharpest parts for later. The manager glanced over, counting minutes like coins. Mia said, "You're not alone," and the words made gravity kinder. Emily nodded, filing the phrase beside courage. The inbox chimed with a client complaint dressed as politeness. Emily said, "I'll fix it," though her hands felt like borrowed tools. Mia squeezed her shoulder and said, "You already fixed the hardest thing." The elevator doors closed with a hush like a pact. Emily stepped into the day's next test and did not look back. Night returned with a quieter breath, and the apartment learned to be gentle. Emily folded laundry with the patience of a prayer. Noah drew a rocket that carried 2 people and a bright window. Emily said, "That's us," and he nodded like a captain. The phone buzzed with a blocked number, and silence answered for them. Emily locked the screen and set it face down like an old letter. She said, "Bedtime story," and the room leaned closer. The tale was about a lighthouse that kept shining after storms. Noah said, "It never gets tired," and she said, "It rests between waves." The radiator clicked in a rhythm that felt like a lullaby. Emily kissed his forehead, then sat by the window. The city lights held steady, and so did she. Emily walked Noah to the school gate with a smile stitched from fragile threads. He waved twice, like always, before vanishing into the tide of backpacks. She whispered, "Be brave," though her voice cracked under its own weight. The air smelled of damp pavement and fresh pencil shavings. Her phone buzzed with reminders that didn't care about her tired bones. The office waited with its glass walls and thin patience. She stepped onto the bus, gripping the rail as if it could steady her spirit. A stranger glanced at her hollow stare, then looked away. Emily said to herself, "One day at a time," and the words felt both too heavy and too light. The bus engine roared like a restless beast, carrying her toward another day of pretending everything was fine. The office buzzed with phones, keyboards, and the hum of stale air. Emily sat at her desk, screen glaring, deadlines pulsing like a second heartbeat. Her manager leaned in, brows arched, voice clipped as he said, "You're falling behind." She nodded, swallowing the protest that clawed her throat. Her fingers tapped keys that blurred into panic. Emails stacked like bricks on her chest. Nia slid a sticky note that read, "Breathe," and her eyes softened. Emily whispered, "I'm trying," and turned back to the glow that didn't forgive mistakes. The clock ticked louder than footsteps, louder than anything. Each minute felt stolen, each sigh rehearsed. She clung to the idea that surviving today meant she was still standing tomorrow. A knock echoed at her apartment door that evening, and the envelope slid under like a snake. Emily froze, then picked it up with trembling fingers. Legal words screamed louder than the paper's silence. Jason wanted custody. Her knees gave way, and the couch caught her like a reluctant friend. Noah peeked from the hallway, voice small as he asked, "Is it bad?" She forced a smile and said, "It's just words," though the ink carved deeper than knives. The lamp hummed with electricity she couldn't afford to lose. Emily pressed the papers to her chest, as if pressure could erase them. She whispered to herself, "Not him, not now, not ever," while Noah climbed into her lap, anchoring her to what still mattered. Nia arrived with grocery bags and a fire in her eyes. She set them down and said, "He won't win if you don't let him." Emily shook her head, words stuck in her throat. Nia poured coffee like medicine, her movements sharp and certain. Emily whispered, "I can't fight him," and her voice cracked open. Nia leaned closer, hand firm on her shoulder, and said, "You already are." The clock ticked like a drumbeat between them. The groceries remained untouched, bread and fruit waiting for hands that trembled too much to eat. Emily closed her eyes, letting Maya's words stitch courage where fear had frayed her. Night stretched heavy as Emily sat on her bed with shadows pooling at her feet. The papers lay on the nightstand like an enemy she couldn't disarm. She whispered, "He'll take everything," and the silence answered with doubt. Noah slept in the next room, his soft breath threading through the walls. Emily held a photo of them at the park, smiles caught in sunlight, and the ache deepened. She pressed the frame to her chest, rocking slightly, whispering promises the dark barely believed. Sleep refused her, dragging her thoughts across sharp stones. Yet in the quiet, her resolve grew roots. She told herself, "I will not break," and the words lingered like embers, fragile but alive. Emily found the spreadsheet open on Mia's laptop, numbers lined like teeth. Rent was late, fees added, and a transfer labeled Jason's name froze her breath. Nia said, "I meant to tell you," and the room tilted. Emily steadied herself on the counter, palms slick, heart thudding against old trust. Nia's voice broke as she said, "He paid me to pass updates before I knew better." The kettle clicked in the silence like a metronome for regret. Emily said, "How long?" and the word dropped like iron. Nia said, "Only at first. I stopped when I saw you break." Memory flickered of whispers, sudden appearances, and Jason's timed threats. Emily felt the shape of betrayal fit too perfectly with the week's bruises. Nia reached out, but the air refused her hand. Emily said, "We start with the truth," and the kitchen finally breathed. Noah's drawing on the fridge stared back, a rocket refusing gravity. Emily lifted her chin, not forgiving, not yet, but refusing to drown. The bank line crawled while the wall clock smirked in slow circles. Emily clutched a folder of bills that smelled of ink and panic. The teller said, "You're overdrawn," and the fluorescent light made the words harsher. She counted the options and found fewer than yesterday. A text from the landlord blinked into view like a warning buoy. "Hi," Emily said. "I'm making a payment plan to avoid that preferred numbers to people." The printer hissed out a statement that cut neat and cold. She imagined groceries turning into coins, then dust. Nia messaged, "I'll cover a week," and the screen warmed. Emily typed, "Not yet," and pressed send with a steady finger. A child in the line laughed, and it landed like a spark in winter. She gathered the papers, rebuilt her face, and walked back into the city's open mouth. The knock arrived exactly on time, crisp as a rule. A woman introduced herself with a card and a clipboard. Karen White said, "This is a routine welfare check," and her tone carried clipped mercy. Emily led her through tidy rooms that still felt inspected. Noah sat at the table, coloring a lighthouse that refused to dim. Karen asked about schedules, meals, and sleep, each word a scale weighing love. Emily answered evenly, letting care speak through detail. Karen said, "Any contact with Jason?" and the air thinned. Emily said, "He left last week," and the clock ticked like a witness. Noah looked up and said, "We make pancakes," and the clipboard paused. Karen's eyes softened, then reset to protocol. The apartment exhaled when the door closed, but the checklist's echo lingered. The call came from an unknown number and wore Jason's voice like a bruise. Jason Reed said, "Courts, listen when I speak," and Emily felt the floor look for a trapdoor. He mentioned missed payments that he had helped cause. He teased a witness who owed him a favor. Emily gripped the phone until her knuckles paled. She said, "Stop lying," and the ceiling fan clicked a steady defiance. Jason said, "See you in court," and the line emptied. She set the phone down like a lit match and watched it cool. Outside, traffic stitched the day back together. Emily opened the window to the drift of the street, chose air over ash, and wrote dates and times on a clean page. The ink dried straight, not shaking. The page waited for courage to multiply. Night fell like velvet pulled tight, and Emily found Noah's room glowing soft. He said, "Are we in trouble?" and the question shook the dust from her resolve. She sat on the floor beside his bed, the carpet rough, the moment tender. Emily said, "We are in a tunnel, not a pit," and Noah traced the rocket on his page. He whispered, "Tunnels have exits," and she felt something unclench. She told him a story of trains that learned the shape of light. He smiled at the idea of engines with brave hearts. Emily said, "We keep going forward," and the room agreed in small sounds. He drifted as streetlight stripes climbed the wall. Emily stayed until his breath evened, then stood with quieter feet. She folded the day, placed it on the shelf, and chose tomorrow. Emily sat across from Robert Hayes, the lawyer whose desk carried the smell of old wood and ink. He said, "Custody battles are wars of patience," and his voice cut steady. She nodded, clutching papers as if they were lifelines. He outlined the process, each word heavy with cost and time. Emily whispered, "I'll fight," and the phrase felt carved from stone. Robert said, "Gather everything. Records, testimonies, even whispers." She thought of nights logged in memory, scars no one else could see. The office clock ticked in sharp beats, louder than traffic outside. And Robert said, "Jason will push hard, but truth is your weapon." She breathed through the weight, inhaling a courage she had not named yet. Leaving, she glanced at her reflection in the glass door, seeing not fear but something steelier. She whispered, one step forward, and stepped into the light. The courtroom smelled of polish and pressure. Emily sat at the table, fingers tight around a pen. Jason leaned back with smug ease, his lawyer whispering in his ear. The judge entered, silence rippled. Emily said softly, "For Noah," and the phrase steadied her. The bailiff called the case, and the air thickened. Jason's eyes caught hers, flashing challenge, daring her to falter. She forced herself upright, shoulders square, eyes clear. The lawyer beside her whispered, "Just breathe." but her heart pounded like a drum. Every word spoken in the chamber felt sharpened for battle. Emily's hand brushed the folder of evidence, and she whispered again, "For Noah, like a shield." The gavel cracked, and the war began. Later that evening, Emily slumped on Maya's couch, exhaustion dripping from her frame. Nia placed tea in her hand and said, "You didn't break that matters." Emily whispered, "I felt like glass," and the confession cracked. Nia said, "Glass cuts too," and her smile steadied the room. Emily let herself breathe in the warmth of someone refusing to let her drown. The day's sharp edges dulled in the soft glow of the lamp. The television murmured background noise, irrelevant but grounding. Emily said, "He wants to bury me." And Mia answered, "Then rise louder." Silence folded around them, thick with shared battle scars. The tea cooled, but the heat of resilience lingered. At the grocery store, Emily felt the air shift when Daniel Ross appeared in the next aisle. He was older now, but his smile still held quiet warmth. "Daniel," said Emily, and she turned startled. He offered a small wave, awkward yet gentle. Emily said, "It's been years," and the jars of pasta sauce stood like silent witnesses. Daniel asked about Noah, voice steady with interest, not pity. She answered carefully, words guarded but not cold. He said, "If you need anything, even company," and the sincerity cracked her shield. For a moment, she let the thought of trust flicker alive. She said, "Maybe," and the aisle felt less crowded. The sound of a cartwheel squeaking carried them both back into motion. That night, Emily tucked Noah into bed, his curls brushing her cheek as he leaned close. He asked, "Are you scared?" And the question cut clean. She said, "Yes, but I'm stronger than scared," and his eyes gleamed with belief. He whispered, "Then I am too," and the words curled around her heart like armor. She sat on the edge of the bed, humming an old tune their mother once sang, the melody wrapping the room in calm. Noah's eyelids fluttered, surrendering to sleep. Emily stayed, watching the steady rhythm of his chest, letting it ground her. She whispered, "I won't give up," and the night seemed to listen. For the first time in days, her shoulders eased, the weight shifting into something she could carry. The letter came in a plain envelope, but the handwriting on the front hit like thunder. Emily froze before opening it, fingers stiff as stone. Inside was a name she had not spoken in years. Sarah Carter. Her sister, gone for a decade, suddenly asked to meet. Emily whispered, "Why now?" and the silence gave no answer. The words on the page offered help, but also carried shadows of abandonment. She remembered nights crying into a pillow while Sarah vanished into her own chaos. Noah tugged her sleeve and asked, "Who is it?" Emily folded the letter and said, "Someone who forgot us once." She placed it on the table, heart pounding. For the first time, the past was knocking louder than Jason. Emily whispered, "Do I open that door?" and fear sat heavy beside her. The cafe smelled of bitter coffee and rain-soaked coats. Emily stood at the doorway, clutching her umbrella, as her eyes locked on Sarah. Sarah Carter said, "You look just like her," and grief twisted the moment. Emily sat down, stiff as stone, her voice sharp as she asked, "Why now?" Sarah said, "I was lost. But I've been watching, waiting for courage." Emily's jaw clenched, years of silence pressing against words she could not swallow. The hum of espresso machines filled the pauses. Sarah leaned closer, voice softer. "I want to help you fight him." Emily said, "Help costs trust, and I don't have much left." Outside, rain streaked the windows like history refusing to fade. That night Noah sprawled on the rug, crayons scattered like stars. He held up a drawing of 3 figures beneath a sun. Emily asked, "Who's that?" And he said, "It's us with someone new." She felt the sting of hope mixed with confusion. She tucked the drawing into her lap and said, "Families are complicated." Noah looked at her with wide eyes and whispered, "But they can grow, right?" Emily nodded, heart torn between fear and possibility. The rain tapped against the window, a metronome for decisions she wasn't ready to make. She kissed his forehead, anchoring herself to his innocent faith. Sarah visited the next day, standing awkwardly in the doorway with a bag of groceries. Emily hesitated, then stepped aside. Sarah said, "I want to start by giving, not asking." The kitchen filled with small sounds, paper bags rustling, fridge opening. Noah peeked from behind Emily, cautious but curious. Sarah bent down and said, "Hi Noah, I'm your aunt." He blinked, then whispered, "Do you like pancakes?" And she laughed, nodding. Emily watched the exchange with a lump in her throat. The air shifted, not healed but less jagged. She thought, maybe bridges could still be built, even if the wood was old and cracked. Later that night, Emily and Sarah sat on the balcony, city lights blinking like quiet witnesses. Sarah said, "I was weak before, but I won't run again." Emily looked at her, searching for truth in the shadows of her face. She whispered, "Words aren't enough," and Sarah replied, "Then let me show you." The city hummed below, cars threading through dark streets. Emily thought of courtrooms, Jason's threats, and Noah's smile, all tangled in one future. For the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. She said, "If you stay, we fight together," and Sarah nodded with tears glinting. The night air carried away some of the old weight, leaving space for something new. The courthouse echoed with murmurs as Emily adjusted her blazer, hands clammy but steady. Jason sat smug across the aisle, his lawyer whispering strategies like venom. The judge called for opening arguments, and Emily's chest rose with resolve. Robert leaned close and said, "Truth is our weapon, let them choke on it." She nodded, inhaling the gravity of the moment. Jason's lies painted her as unstable, unfit, but she held her gaze on the judge. Each word he spoke cut like a blade, but Emily whispered to herself, "For Noah." The courtroom air thickened, every eye watching, every silence waited. The battle had begun, and she refused to flinch. Hours later, Emily's voice quivered as she described sleepless nights, Noah's fear, and Jason's threats. Jason smirked, arms folded, whispering into his lawyer's ear. The judge scribbled notes, brows furrowed. Emily's hands trembled, but her words sharpened with each sentence. She said, "He left us broken, and I rebuilt piece by piece." Jason muttered under his breath, but she pressed on, refusing silence. The gallery leaned forward, breaths held. Her truth cracked through the chamber like lightning, undeniable. She sat back, pulse racing but eyes clear. For the first time, Jason's smirk faltered. Sarah stepped forward, voice unsteady but strong, as she testified to Jason's manipulations she had witnessed. She said, "I was silent before, but I won't be now." Jason's face stiffened, anger rippling under his mask. Emily looked at her sister with gratitude burning in her chest. Sarah continued, detailing threats, lies, and late-night calls she once ignored. The courtroom buzzed with shock, whispers spreading like fire. Jason's lawyer objected, but the judge overruled, eyes narrowing. Emily whispered, "Thank you," though Sarah didn't glance back. The bond stitched with pain was beginning to repair. Jason erupted, standing with fists tight as he shouted denials, his mask breaking under pressure. The bailiff moved closer, tension sparking across the room. The judge struck the gavel sharply, demanding silence. Emily sat still, steady as stone, watching his unraveling. Jason shouted, "She's twisting everything," but his voice cracked with desperation. The gallery gasped. The mask of control he wore finally shattered. Emily thought, this is the truth laid bare. The judge warned him once more, and Jason slumped back, fury smoldering. The tide had shifted, and Emily knew it. Closing arguments fell heavy, Robert's words weaving Emily's truth into a shield of facts and heart. He said, "She fought to protect, while he fought to destroy." Emily felt tears sting but held firm. Jason sat pale, his confidence stripped away. The judge's final gavel echoed like thunder. The decision to come later, but the battle already shifted. Emily whispered to herself. We stood tall, and the weight eased from her chest. Noah's face filled her mind, his laugh, his trust, his future. For the first time, victory felt possible, not distant. She rose from the table, steady, unbroken, and ready for whatever came next. The courtroom hushed as the decision landed like rain on dry earth. Emily gripped the table and felt the tremor pass through her bones. The judge granted custody, and silence burst into a soft wave of breath. Robert said, "You did it," and she shook her head, whispering, "We did." Jason stared at the floor, his certainty leaking away like ink in water. Emily looked toward the door, as if Noah might walk in with morning light. She thought of nights spent counting fears like coins. She thought of Sarah's testimony threading hope through doubt. Emily said, "We go home," and the words felt new and clean. She lifted the folder, lighter than it had ever been. Outside, the day brightened as if the city knew. She stepped forward without flinching. The apartment received her like a room that had learned patience. Boxes of evidence still lined the wall, but their edges seemed duller. Sarah set tea on the table and said, "You stood taller than fear." Emily traced the rim of the cup and let warmth answer first. She said, "Victory isn't quiet," and the radiator clicked in agreement. The phone buzzed with messages from neighbors and coworkers. She typed "thank you," then set the device aside like a sleeping worry. Sarah said, "We rebuild with small bricks," and Emily nodded. The clock moved without judgment, gentle and steady. The air held fewer shadows, though some lingered like old guests. Emily breathed in the ordinary and found it beautiful. After school, Noah ran into her arms with a speed that erased miles. He said, "Are we safe?" And she answered, "Yes, we're safe," letting truth ring. They walked home counting steps like a private drumbeat. He talked about rockets and pancakes and a class project on lighthouses. Emily said, "We'll make a model," and his grin broke the day open. The crosswalk flashed white, and the city slowed to watch them pass. She felt gravity loosen its grip on her shoulders. The future stretched out like a clean page. She said, "We choose the colors," and he laughed. Hope moved from wish to practice, step by steady step. Evening brought quiet that didn't ache. Daniel stopped by with a toolkit and an easy smile. He fixed the loose cabinet and said, "Some things just need steady hands." Emily watched the hinge sit true and felt the metaphor land. She said, "Thank you," and he shrugged, "Anytime." Sarah lit candles that smelled like clean sheets and rain. The room gathered warmth without begging for it. Emily looked around and recognized a home that was hers again. She said, "We start fresh," and no one argued with the line. The night settled, not heavy, just sure. Later, Emily stood by Noah's door, hand resting on the frame like a vow. She watched him sleep, breaths even and soft as tide. She whispered, "We're stronger now," and the words carried without breaking. The city hummed outside, no longer a threat, just a chorus. She sat beside him and felt the room's steady heart. The past still existed, but it no longer drove. Emily said, "We won't stop fighting," and the promise folded into the dark like a beacon. She turned off the lamp and let the quiet bloom. Tomorrow waited, but tonight was theirs. She closed her eyes and chose peace.